My daughter barred me from attending her wedding in Tuscany because I don't speak Italian, so I canceled my $200,000 contribution. Picture it. You raise a daughter on your own after your wife's passing, you finance her education, you champion her dreams, and then she tells you via a video call that you aren't refined enough for her wedding. Isabella suggested I watch her ceremony via a live stream because my presence would mortify her aristocratic Italian in-laws. That was the moment this widowed father decided to teach his conceited daughter a lesson in consequences. One wire transfer canceled, $200,000 in wedding funds vanished, but the money was just the start of Isabella's education. The fairy tale villa wedding, the glamorous life she had curated for herself. It all unraveled faster than she could have ever conceived. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. They say, blood is thicker than water. But what do you do when your own child treats you as if you are unworthy of witnessing the most significant day of her life? My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 62 years old, a successful architect from Chicago, and I raised my daughter Isabella almost entirely by myself after my wife Eleanor passed away 15 years ago. Tuesday mornings always began the same. I was up by 6, coffee brewing, watching the sunrise cast a golden sheen over Lake Michigan from my apartment window. At 62, I had come to treasure these moments of quiet reflection. The apartment was peaceful, calm. Clara was already at her gallery. We've been together for 3 years now. Nothing dramatic, just a gentle companionship after years of loss. Isabella, just thinking her name, brought a proud smile to my face. My daughter had surpassed every dream I ever held for her. 30 years old, a distinguished art historian, fluent in 3 languages. After Eleanor died, Isabella became my entire universe. Every sacrifice, every long night at the firm to pay for her schooling, it had all been for her. Her engagement to Lorenzo filled me with pride. A charming Italian from an old Florentine family who clearly adored her. The wedding planning had been a delight to observe from afar. Tuscany, she'd said, a historic villa overlooking the rolling hills. When she requested financial assistance, I didn't hesitate. $200,000 felt like a small sum for my daughter's happiness. I'd already wired $80,000 for the initial deposits. The final $120,000 was set to be transferred next week. My laptop chimed with a video call notification. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. The background was a chic cafe, which was typical for her. I answered, expecting an update on the wedding. Instead, I was met with this. Dad, Lorenzo's family has made it clear they don't want you at the wedding since you don't speak Italian. They feel it would be awkward to have someone who can't engage in the conversations. It's better if you just watch the live stream from home. We've set up a private link so you can still see everything. It will be just like being there. The financial arrangements remain the same, obviously. I stared at the screen, replaying her words in my head. My daughter had just forbidden me from attending her wedding because I wasn't Italian enough, not cultured enough, not worthy of being in the same space as her new family. But my money was still welcome. The casual cruelty of her words stole my breath. It will be just like being there. As if observing my daughter's wedding through a laptop was the same as walking her down the aisle, as if 15 years of single fatherhood could be dismissed with a streaming link. The irony was gut-wrenching. Isabella built her career explaining the nuances of culture and art, yet she was using my inability to speak Italian as a weapon to banish me from the most important day of her life. My hands were steady. I didn't raise my voice or slam the laptop shut. Instead, a cold, hard finality settled in my heart. This wasn't wedding stress or last-minute jitters. This was a calculated act of humiliation, delivered with surgical precision by the daughter for whom I had sacrificed everything. I thought about all those years I worked extra projects to afford her education, all those Italian language summer camps, art history tours, and study abroad programs in Florence, the immense pride I felt when she earned her doctorate. Had I been financing my own obsolescence? The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but the world had suddenly gone gray. The coffee in my cup had turned cold, or maybe that was just the chill spreading through my soul. I closed the laptop gently and gazed out at the lake. 15 years of devoted single parenting, and this was my thanks. Being told I was too American, too unrefined, too much of an embarrassment to attend my own daughter's wedding. But my bank account was still on the guest list. As I processed her words one last time, something fundamental within me broke. The father who would move mountains for his child was still here, but he had just learned the painful difference between being loved and being used. I couldn't stop replaying that video call. Every word felt like a deliberate blow, each phrase crafted to inflict maximum pain. Lorenzo's family has made it clear they don't want you at the wedding since you don't speak Italian. Not, we wish you could learn a few phrases. Not, perhaps we can hire an interpreter. They simply did not want me there. My own daughter had permitted her future in-laws to ostracize me over a language I never had the chance to learn because I was too busy working to fund her ambitions. They feel it would be awkward having someone who can't engage in the conversations. Awkward, that word struck me with the force of a physical impact. I was an embarrassment to my own daughter. The man who had raised her alone, who had given up personal projects and vacations to pay for her education, was now too awkward to be seen at her wedding. The cultural snobbery was staggering in its audacity. Here I was, an accomplished American architect who had built a respected firm from the ground up, being written off as uncultured because I spoke only English. My grandfather had arrived in this country with nothing but hope and a strong work ethic. My father had served his country. I had designed buildings, created jobs, paid taxes, and raised a daughter who became everything I dreamed she could be. But none of that was relevant to the Conti family. I wasn't Italian, so I wasn't worthy. I walked to my home office and opened the wedding budget spreadsheet I had been keeping. The figures stared back at me, stark and unforgiving. Villa rental deposit, $40,000, paid. Catering advance, $25,000, paid. Photographer retainer, $15,000, paid. Floral design, $10,000, paid. Total already wired, $80,000. Remaining balance due, $120,000. Grand total, $200,000. $200,000 for my daughter's special day, the same daughter who had just informed me I wasn't refined enough to be there. The financial arrangements remain the same, obviously. As if my continued financial backing was a foregone conclusion, irrespective of how I was treated. As if being banished from my own daughter's wedding would have no bearing on my willingness to underwrite it. Isabella wanted my money, but not my presence. She was perfectly content to let her awkward American father finance her Tuscan fairy tale, as long as he remained out of sight where the Contis wouldn't have to interact with him. But the most bitter irony was yet to be discovered. I opened my laptop and navigated to Isabella's professional blog, a platform I had helped her design when she began her consulting career. Art is a bridge, uniting cultures through beauty, the tagline read. Specializing in Italian Renaissance art, helping museums and collectors connect across cultural divides. I read it again and again, the hypocrisy a burning bile in my throat. My daughter earned her living by bridging cultural gaps. Her entire professional identity was founded on the idea that differences shouldn't create division, that barriers could be surmounted with effort and empathy. She helped strangers from different backgrounds find common ground every single day. Yet she had just used my inability to speak Italian as a reason to exclude me from the most important day of her life. Isabella Vance, the professional bridge builder, had just incinerated the most important bridge she ever had, the one to the father who had made her entire life possible. The woman who helped others connect across cultures had just severed ties with her own father, because he didn't meet her new family's cultural standards. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. This was no longer just about a wedding. This was about respect, dignity, and the horrifying realization that I had raised a person who could separate love from utility with chilling precision. My daughter, the bridge builder, had just shown me exactly where I ranked in her life. I was good enough to bankroll her dreams, but not cultured enough to be a part of them. As the full weight of her hypocrisy washed over me, I understood one thing with painful clarity. Isabella had never seen me as her father. She had seen me as her benefactor. I sat in my study, gazing at Eleanor's photograph on the mantelpiece. 15 years had gone by since I'd lost her, but her spirit still felt present in this room. She had curated every book on these shelves, chosen the very armchair I now occupied, grappling with the most difficult decision I'd faced since her funeral. What would Eleanor think of the person Isabella had become? My wife had been a historian, patient and perceptive, but she had zero tolerance for disrespect. I recalled a time when Isabella was 9, sighing dramatically at a waiter who had mixed up her order. Eleanor had insisted Isabella apologize, then explain something that had stayed with me forever. "Sweetheart," she'd said, "how we treat people reveals everything about our character. Kindness isn't a choice, it's the core of our humanity." Eleanor had raised Isabella with these principles: respect for everyone, regardless of their station or background, appreciation for those who support us, gratitude for the sacrifices made on our behalf. Where had those principles gone? I picked up Eleanor's photo, remembering her worries about overindulging Isabella after her diagnosis. "Don't let your guilt make you weak, Arthur," she'd whispered during one of her last stays in the hospital. "Love her fiercely, but do not let her become entitled. She must learn that respect is earned, not an entitlement." Had I failed Eleanor? Had my grief over losing her made me too lenient with Isabella? Had I confused love with enablement, mistaking generosity for effective parenting? The guilt was a heavy weight. Perhaps Isabella's behavior was my own fault. Maybe I had created this person by never saying no, never establishing firm boundaries, never demanding the respect that Eleanor had deemed essential. But then I imagined Eleanor's reaction to Isabella's video call. My wife would have been horrified. She would have seen the manipulation for what it was, immediately identifying the calculated cruelty. Eleanor never accepted disrespect, not from difficult students at the university, not from rude strangers, and certainly not from our own daughter. "You're not doing her any favors by tolerating this," I could almost hear Eleanor saying. "You're teaching her that love means being a doormat." The internal conflict was immense. A part of me wanted to absorb the humiliation, pay for the wedding, and hope that Isabella would somehow have an epiphany after the ceremony. Maybe she'd realize the gravity of what she'd done. Maybe she'd apologize. But the stronger part of me, the part that had been fortified by Eleanor's strength, knew better. This wasn't about punishment. This was about instilling a lesson that was long overdue. Clara appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. She had been quietly supportive all morning, never interjecting, never trying to steer my decision. Her restraint was a gift. "Are you all right?" she asked, placing a mug on my desk. Eleanor always said that sometimes the most loving act is to refuse to enable someone's worst impulses, I said, still holding the photograph. Clara nodded. "She sounds like she was a very wise woman." She was, and she would be appalled by what Isabella has become. The truth struck me with a startling lucidity. I wouldn't be betraying Eleanor's memory by setting boundaries with Isabella. I would be honoring it. My wife had tried to teach our daughter about respect and gratitude. By accepting Isabella's treatment, I was negating everything Eleanor had worked to instill. Eleanor would demand that I stand up for myself. She'd want me to show Isabella that actions have consequences, that respect is non-negotiable, and that love does not require the acceptance of abuse. I placed the photograph back on the mantel and looked at Clara. I know what I have to do. What's that? Something Eleanor would have done 15 years ago if she had lived to see this day. The decision solidified with a surprising sense of peace. This wasn't about anger or revenge. This was about dignity, self-respect, and upholding the values Eleanor had tried to teach us both. Isabella had made her choice during that video call. She had chosen her new family's approval over her father's dignity. She had chosen financial exploitation over a genuine relationship. Now it was my turn to make a choice. As I sat there, Eleanor's wisdom guiding me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Absolute certainty. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the private wealth management offices on Michigan Avenue. The polished marble floors and minimalist decor felt different today. I wasn't there as a grateful client. I was there as a man reclaiming his self-worth. "Mr. Vance," David Chen rose from behind his desk. We had worked together for over a decade. He had helped structure my firm's finances and managed my personal investments. "David, I need your help with an urgent matter." "Of course. How can I help?" I settled into the chair across from his desk. "I need to cancel a wire transfer we scheduled to a number of vendors in Italy for my daughter's wedding." David blinked, clearly taken aback. "The one for the villa and catering services in Tuscany?" That's a significant transfer to cancel. May I ask what's changed? The circumstances have changed. I need it stopped immediately. David pulled up my account on his monitor. Let me see. Yes, here it is. 200,000 in total commitments. We've already processed 80,000 in payments. I understand. I want the final 120,000 transfer canceled. Mr. Vance, you realize this will immediately put all pending contracts with the Italian vendors in jeopardy. They will be notified that the expected payment will not be arriving. That is precisely what I want. David leaned back, studying my expression. In 10 years of business, he had learned to read me well. This is highly unusual for you. You have always been exceedingly generous with family matters. Sometimes generosity crosses the line into enabling, David. I've learned the difference. He nodded slowly. Well, we can execute this immediately. The transfer isn't scheduled to go out for another 10 days, which is when the vendors are expecting their final payments. Perfect. Isabella would have no advance warning, no time to arrange for alternative funding. What about my legal liability? None at all, David assured me. You are the source of funds, not the signatory on the contracts. Your daughter and her fiancé are the parties in these agreements. When the funds don't arrive, the vendors will contact them directly for payment. And if they are unable to pay, the contracts are voided, venues are released, services are canceled, standard international procedure. A sense of calm satisfaction washed over me. This was not an emotional act of revenge. It was a rational financial decision. I was withdrawing support from an arrangement where I had been explicitly excluded. Are you absolutely certain about this? David asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Once I cancel this, it's immediate and cannot be reversed. I thought about Isabella's video call, about being told I was an embarrassment, about the casual cruelty of, it will be just like being there. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. For the next 20 minutes, I signed documents and gave verbal confirmations. Each signature felt like taking back a piece of myself that I had given away too freely. The process was surprisingly straightforward, a few keystrokes that would unravel months of meticulous wedding planning. It's done, David said finally, printing the confirmation slips. The transfer is officially canceled. I stood and shook his hand. Thank you, David. I appreciate your discretion. Always. And if I may say, sometimes the most difficult decisions are the correct ones. As I walked out of the building, I felt something I hadn't in years, the quiet strength that comes from refusing to be taken for granted. Isabella had taught me that respect was optional. I was about to teach her that, so was my financial support. The process was in motion. In 10 days, when the payment deadline passed and no money materialized, Isabella would learn what it felt like to face the consequences of her choices. The next 10 days unfolded with a surreal sense of normalcy. I went to the office, attended client meetings, had dinner with Clara, and maintained my usual routine. But beneath it all, I held a quiet sense of anticipation that was both unfamiliar and strangely empowering. Isabella called every day, completely oblivious to what I had done. The following Tuesday, 5 days after my meeting with David, she called, her voice bubbling with excitement. Dad, you won't believe how magnificent the villa is, she effused. The floral designer showed us the mock-ups yesterday, and they're breathtaking. Lorenzo's mother actually became emotional when she saw them. I made the appropriate encouraging noises, letting her describe a wedding I would never see, funded by money that would never be sent. Wednesday brought news about the string quartet. They're flying in from Vienna, she went on. They've played for royalty, can you believe it? My wedding with a royal quartet. That sounds lovely, I replied, my voice even. By Thursday, she was detailing the menu. 6 courses, Dad. The chef trained at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Rome. Lorenzo says it's the kind of meal that will make people talk about the wedding for years. It would certainly be memorable, though not in the way she imagined. The dramatic irony was almost overwhelming. Isabella was orchestrating every detail of her perfect day, completely unaware that the financial scaffolding holding it up had been silently dismantled. She spoke with such utter confidence that everything would proceed exactly as she planned. Friday's call contained the critical piece of information. The final payments are due on Monday, she mentioned offhandedly, as if discussing the weather. Then it's just 2 more weeks until the big day. Monday, the day the vendors would realize no payment was forthcoming. That same Friday afternoon, Mark O'Connell, my oldest friend, stopped by my office. He settled into the chair opposite my desk with the ease of a 30-year friendship. "You seem different lately," he noted, observing my face. "Calmer, more centered." "Do I?" "Yeah, like you've settled something that was troubling you." He paused. "Everything all right with Isabella's wedding?" I chose my words with care. "Everything is proceeding exactly as it should be." Mark raised an eyebrow. He knew me well enough to detect my deliberate ambiguity. "That's a curious way of putting it." "Sometimes the most important decisions are the ones that restore a sense of balance," I said. He nodded slowly, not pushing for more, but understanding that something profound was underway. "Well, whatever it is, it suits you. You look like a man who's rediscovered his footing." That weekend, 9 days after canceling the wire transfer, Isabella called with the final logistics. The excitement in her voice was palpable, even with my knowledge of the impending collapse. "Lorenzo's entire family is flying in from all over Europe," she said. 42 people. "They're so incredibly cultured, Dad. You'd love them, but you know, the language issue." Actually, I knew exactly how it was. Sunday evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset bleed across the Chicago skyline in hues of orange and deep violet. Tomorrow, the vendors in Tuscany would expect their final payments. Tomorrow, Isabella's perfect world would start to fracture. I felt no guilt, no regret, just a profound sense of rightness, like a compass needle finally pointing true north. Clara joined me with 2 glasses of wine. "A penny for your thoughts." "Just thinking about lessons," I said, "and how sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them experience the full weight of their choices." She squeezed my hand. "Your daughter is about to learn something very important, isn't she?" "Yes," I said. "She is." Monday morning, exactly 10 days after my visit to the wealth management firm, dawned cool and clear. I made my coffee, read the paper, and prepared for another ordinary day. But it was not an ordinary day. It was the day Isabella would discover that actions have consequences, that respect is not optional, and that her father was not the ATM she had taken him for. Somewhere in Tuscany, vendors were checking their bank accounts and finding them empty. The phone would ring soon. The call came on Wednesday morning. I was in my office reviewing blueprints when my phone buzzed. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. 2 days had passed since the payment deadline, exactly the time frame David had predicted for the vendors to react. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. "Dad?" Isabella's voice was tight, a pitch higher than normal. "I need to talk to you. There's a problem with the wedding payments." "What kind of problem?" I asked, keeping my tone calm and neutral. "The villa manager called this morning. They said the final payment hasn't arrived. But that's impossible. You guaranteed everything, didn't you? They're threatening to cancel our reservation." I leaned back in my chair. "Did they mention anything else?" "The caterer called too, and the quartet. Dad, they're all saying the same thing. No payment received. They're talking about canceling everything." Her voice was cracking with panic. "This must be some kind of international banking error. Have you checked with Lorenzo? Perhaps there was a miscommunication. He's in meetings all day. Dad, I need you to call the bank right now. Please fix this." The desperation in her voice was raw. For the first time since that condescending video call, Isabella needed her father. Not just his money. Well, actually, it was exactly his money. But she needed him to solve her problem. "Isabella, I think there's something you need to know." "What, Dad?" "Just call the bank. We can talk about it later." "I canceled the wire transfer." Silence. A complete, absolute void. "What?" Her voice was a faint whisper. "I revoked the payment guarantee. The vendors were notified that no further funds would be coming from my accounts." "You can't do that. The wedding is in 2 weeks." "I can, and I did." "But why, Dad? This is my wedding. You promised." "I promised to pay for a wedding to which I was invited. You disinvited me, remember? You told me I was an embarrassment to your new family." "That's not... We can fix it. You can come, Dad. Please, you have to fix this." It was remarkable how quickly her position shifted when money was on the line. "Isabella, the decision is final." "This is because of Clara, isn't it?" Her voice turned sharp, grasping at straws. "You're choosing that woman over your own daughter." This has nothing to do with Clara. This is about respect. Respect? I'm your daughter. Yes, you are. And you told me I wasn't cultured enough to witness you get married. You relegated me to a live stream while expecting me to finance your perfect day. I could hear her start to cry, the reality of her predicament finally crashing down on her. Lorenzo is going to be furious, she sobbed. His family, oh God, his family is going to be so angry. She was right about that. The next call came on Friday afternoon. This time, Isabella's voice was hollow, defeated. It's over, she said, her voice flat. What's over? Everything. The engagement, the wedding. Lorenzo's mother convened an emergency family council yesterday. She said the Vance family has proven to be unreliable and lacking in proper breeding. They're calling off the wedding. I felt a brief flicker of surprise. I had anticipated consequences, but not this swift, this absolute. And Lorenzo? He said he can't marry into a family that would embarrass his own. He said you humiliated them by pulling the funding at the 11th hour. Her laugh was brittle and sharp. Funny how it's your fault, not mine. What about the money you've saved? $5,000, Dad. I have $5,000. The villa alone cost $90,000. I lived on your generosity for so long, I never learned to manage my own money properly. The admission was a stark confession hanging in the air between us. Lorenzo returned the ring yesterday, she went on, her voice devoid of emotion. He sent it by courier. He couldn't even face me. His mother sent a note saying the Conti family cannot associate with people of questionable character and financial instability. I'm sorry it came to this, Isabella. Are you? Because you got exactly what you wanted. You ruined my wedding, my engagement, my entire future. I didn't ruin anything. I simply stopped paying for my own humiliation. The line was quiet for a long moment. I hate you, she whispered, and then she hung up. I set the phone down and stared out my office window. In less than a week, Isabella had lost her wedding, her fiancé, and her delusion of unconditional financial support. She had learned that actions have consequences. It was a lesson 15 years overdue. The fallout was swift and merciless. Within days of Isabella's engagement being called off, my phone began ringing with calls from extended family. Word traveled fast. A canceled wedding, a broken engagement, and the daughter who had excluded her own father. My sister Helen called first. Arthur, I heard about Isabella's wedding. What on earth happened? I gave her the unvarnished facts. Isabella had disinvited me over a language barrier. I had withdrawn my financial support. The wedding had imploded. She disinvited you from your own daughter's wedding? Helen's voice was incredulous. After everything you have done for her? That's correct. Good for you for standing up to her. That girl has been spoiled since Eleanor died. Similar conversations followed with cousins, aunts, and old family friends. The universal sentiment was shock at Isabella's audacity and support for my decision. Holiday invitations that would have included Isabella were quietly rescinded. Family events proceeded without her. Isabella's professional life began to fracture as well. The art history world in Chicago was smaller than one might think, and whispers of family instability soon reached corporate clients. A business associate, Julia Schmidt, mentioned it tactfully. Arthur, we heard there were some personal issues affecting Isabella's reliability. We're reevaluating our consulting contract with her. What sort of issues? Family turmoil impacting professional responsibilities. Our board is nervous about instability. I did not defend her. Isabella had made her bed. The financial reality hit the hardest. Isabella had lived so comfortably on my subsidies that she had never learned to budget. Her downtown apartment rent was $3,500 a month, manageable when Dad was quietly covering half, but impossible on an art historian's income alone. 2 weeks after our last call, Isabella appeared at my office building. The front desk called up. She was in the lobby, demanding to see me. Tell her I'm in a meeting. She says it's an emergency, Mr. Vance, a family matter. Tell her to schedule an appointment through my assistant. That evening, she was at my apartment building, sitting on the front steps of the lobby for 2 hours. I stayed at Clara's that night. The desperate emails started arriving daily. Dad, please call me. I know I made a mistake, but we're family. I'm losing clients because of this. I can't afford my rent. I need help. I'm sorry about the wedding invitation. I was wrong. Each email chronicled her unraveling situation. The entitled young woman who had so casually dismissed her father was now discovering life without his financial safety net. But it was the manipulative emails that bothered me the most. Mom would want us to fix this. You're destroying our family over one little mistake. Clara has turned you against your own daughter. These attempts to weaponize Eleanor's memory and blame Clara only hardened my resolve. Isabella still didn't grasp that this was about her own actions, not outside influences. The final attempt came 3 weeks after the collapse. Isabella confronted me in the parking garage of my building. "Dad, please, I'm desperate." She looked different, thinner, exhausted, dressed in simple clothes instead of her usual designer outfits. "I lost my last major client this week. I can't pay my rent. I can't afford food." "I know I hurt you, but I'm your daughter." "Yes, you are my daughter. And I raised you to treat people with respect and gratitude. You chose to do neither. I was wrong about the wedding, I admit it, but this punishment is too much." "This isn't punishment, Isabella. These are consequences. There is a difference." "What's the difference?" "Punishment is something I inflict upon you. Consequences are something you have brought upon yourself." She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. "So that's it? You're just going to let me lose everything?" "You already lost everything that truly matters. The rest is just money and convenience." I walked away, leaving her standing in the parking garage. As I drove home, I felt no pleasure in her pain, but I felt no guilt either. Isabella was learning the true cost of independence, and it was a lesson 15 years overdue. The daughter who made her living bridging cultural divides had burned the most important bridge of all, the one to the father who had made everything possible. 6 months later, I woke to the sound of gulls crying over Lake Michigan. The morning light felt different, softer, more serene. At 62, I had learned that true peace comes not from dodging difficult choices, but from making the right ones, no matter how much they hurt. Isabella and I hadn't spoken since that confrontation in the parking garage. I'd heard through the family grapevine that she had moved into a small studio apartment in a less fashionable neighborhood, was slowly rebuilding her client list, and had taken a part-time job at a museum to make ends meet. She was learning what financial independence truly meant, the hard way, but perhaps the only way the lesson would endure. I felt no satisfaction in her hardship, but no guilt either, though that wasn't entirely true. Late at night in the quiet of my study, I sometimes wondered if I had failed her in a different way, long ago. Perhaps I had spoiled her too much after Eleanor died, letting my guilt over her mother's death transform me from a parent into a benefactor. Maybe if I had established boundaries sooner, taught her the value of gratitude and respect when she was young, none of this would have ever occurred. But ruminating on past mistakes was futile. Isabella was 30 years old enough to understand that actions have consequences, and old enough to learn from them. Clara and I had grown even closer through this ordeal. She had never once suggested I reconcile with Isabella, never pressured me to mend the relationship. Instead, she had simply supported my decision to hold my ground. That restraint, that respect for my autonomy, meant the world to me. "You're different now," she told me one evening as we sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle to life. "More at peace, like you've recovered something you'd lost." She was right. I had recovered something, my self-respect. For 15 years after Eleanor's death, I'd confused love with enablement, mistaking generosity for good parenting. I'd been so terrified of losing Isabella that I had never insisted she treat me with basic human dignity. The firm was flourishing. Freed from the constant drain of Isabella's emergencies and financial needs, I had been able to focus on growing my practice. Clients respected how I had handled my personal life. Word had gotten around about my principled stand, and it had unexpectedly burnished my professional reputation. Mark O'Connell stopped by the office regularly, and he had noticed the change too. "You know what I admire about what you did?" he said during one of our lunches. "You didn't do it out of anger. You did it with dignity. That's the difference between revenge and justice." He was right. This had never been about hurting Isabella. It had been about teaching her that respect is non-negotiable, that love doesn't mean accepting abuse, and that financial support carries an expectation of basic human decency. The extended family had completely rallied around my decision. Holiday gatherings were more peaceful without Isabella's drama and sense of entitlement. My sister Helen had said it best. "Arthur, you didn't lose a daughter. You stopped enabling someone who was using you." I sometimes wondered if Isabella had truly learned anything from this. I hoped she had, but I couldn't control that outcome. I could only control my own choices, my own boundaries, and my own self-respect. People often asked if I missed her. The honest answer was complex. I missed the daughter I had raised, the little girl who used to sketch buildings with me at our dining room table. But I did not miss the entitled young woman who had treated me like a bank account with a heartbeat. If Isabella ever genuinely changed, if she ever developed real gratitude, real respect, a real understanding of her actions, perhaps we could have a relationship again someday. But it would have to be on terms of mutual respect, not financial dependency. As I sat in my study that evening, looking at Eleanor's photograph, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with my decisions. I hadn't destroyed my daughter's wedding. I'd simply stopped paying for my own exclusion. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes, the most important lesson a parent can teach is that respect isn't optional. Not even from family. Especially not from family. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes, life teaches us the hardest lessons through the people we love the most. Arthur's story is a reminder that true love sometimes means establishing boundaries, even with family. As it says in Proverbs, "Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." God grants us the wisdom to know when generosity becomes enabling, when kindness becomes a weakness. This story of betrayal isn't just about a father and a daughter. It's about the universal conflict between unconditional love and conditional respect. Like many tales passed down through generations, it holds timeless wisdom about dignity and self-worth. Our ancestors understood something we seem to have forgotten. Respect is non-negotiable, not even from those for whom we have sacrificed everything. In stories of betrayal like this one, we see how financial manipulation can sever the most sacred of bonds. But we also see redemption, not through reconciliation, but through self-respect. God doesn't call us to be doormats. He calls us to love with wisdom. As Scripture teaches, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The most profound stories often end not with joyful reunions, but with hard-won peace. Arthur learned what his own grandfather knew. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. God blesses those who choose dignity over desperation, boundaries over enablement. What is your take on Arthur's decision? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your thoughts below. Hit that subscribe button for more powerful stories. And let us know, was he right to cancel the wedding funding?